Hey guys, in today's video, we have an absolutely impressive story that will change your view of evil and good. Let's discover the journey of Solomon, a man who, after a near-death experience, had a transformative encounter with Jesus and revealed the hidden truth about Lucifer, which will surprise you. What he discovered about the nature of evil and the power of love will change everything you thought about spiritual warfare. Before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Get ready for this spiritual journey that will touch your soul and challenge everything you know. The morning started like any other. The sun peeked through my kitchen curtains as I busied myself with coffee. Savannah has a particular warmth, and that morning was no exception. But something inside me felt out of place. It was a strange feeling, an uneasiness that I didn't know where it came from. I held the kitchen counter for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to shake the feeling away, and then, like an overwhelming wave, the pain arrived. A pressure spread across my chest, intensifying like an armful of fire rising through my stomach. My muscles seemed to weaken, as if the life was being drained from within me. Sweat was pouring down my face, and each breath was a painful effort. I tried to call for help, but my voice was weak, almost inaudible. It was as if my own body was betraying me, pulling me into a darkness that offered no resistance. I fell to the ground, hearing the distant sound of something breaking around me. Maybe it was a cup, but I couldn't make it out. Everything seemed so far away, like an echo in a long, empty tunnel. The warmth of the tile floor was almost comforting, but it couldn't shake the cold that now gripped my body. There, lying there, as the world around me seemed to fade into shadows and faded sounds, I felt my mind float away. The fear was replaced by a strange feeling of calm. I thought about the faces of the people I loved, my children, the friends who had become like family over the years, and a feeling of peace began to grow. I knew, somehow, that I was leaving. At the hospital, I was later told, paramedics found me in critical condition, unconscious for almost 5 days. I was on the brink of death, vital signs fading by the second, and the chances of surviving were slim. The medical team was fighting against time. My body was failing, but somehow I still felt strangely calm, almost oblivious to the chaos unfolding around me. For them, it was a race against time. For me, it was the beginning of a journey I would never have imagined. That was the moment when everything changed. The moment I said goodbye to earthly life and prepared myself, without knowing it, for the greatest experience of my life. When everything seemed to fade away, my consciousness did not disappear with my body. Instead, I felt a lightness I had never experienced before. Suddenly, I was floating above myself. I looked down and saw my limp, pale, frail body lying on the gurney as the doctors worked frantically around it. The heart monitor emitted a constant, high-pitched sound that broke the silence in the room, indicating that my heart had stopped. I observed it all with a surreal calm, as if I were separated from the anguish and despair around me. The doctors, covered in sweat and tension, shouted orders as they tried to bring me back. One of them, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a determined expression, pressed rhythmically on my chest while another doctor adjusted a breathing tube. The atmosphere was charged with adrenaline, but somehow I felt distant, as if the scene were a play and I was just an observer. The intensity of their actions and the despair on their faces did not cause me any fear. On the contrary, there was a serene peace that came over me. As the moments passed, I noticed my perception was changing. It was as if time slowed down, allowing me to observe every detail. Memories of the people he loved began to emerge. In my mind, I saw my daughter Sarah's smile, so young and vibrant, and the memories of the simple, happy moments we had shared. I saw the face of my late wife, the love of my life, who had passed away years ago. The feeling was deep and pure, as if the pain and anguish of life had been dissolved. I could hear the doctors shouting orders, but their voices seemed to echo in the distance, as if they were in a world I was leaving behind. I felt a kind of goodbye, but not in a sad way. It was as if I was being released from the shackles of earthly existence. The feeling was liberating, a lightness I had never felt before. As I continued to float, a soft light began to appear in the distance. I felt an inexplicable attraction, a call to that light that seemed to promise complete peace. Without resistance, I began to move toward it, feeling increasingly distant from the sounds of the room and the body I now saw as an empty shell. I was ready to follow that path without fear, just with a feeling of acceptance and completeness. The feeling of peace that enveloped me as I floated toward the light was abruptly interrupted. I felt intense pain, like an electric current running through my entire being. With a shock, I was pulled back into my body, and in an instant, serenity dissolved into suffering. I opened my eyes for a brief second, blinking against the bright light of the room as my breathing came back in ragged sobs. It was as if I was trapped in a flesh and blood trap, where every beat of my heart made my body vibrate with pain. I heard voices around me, hushed tones, but I realized they were words of relief. The doctors seemed relieved that they had managed to bring me back. One of them said, "He's stabilizing. We're doing it." But for me, the experience was unbearable. My skin burned, my muscles ached, and every breath felt like a challenge. I couldn't understand why I was back. That moment of peace I had experienced seemed like a distant dream. I closed my eyes, trying to escape the pain, and within seconds I felt like I was leaving again. It was as if my body was giving up, unable to bear the burden of suffering. Once again, I felt my consciousness letting go, leaving the weight of my body behind as my soul escaped into a state of indescribable freedom. The pain dissipated, and once again I found myself floating above, observing my body as a neutral observer, without any affection for what had been my physical life. This time, the transition was faster. I felt a greater attraction, a more urgent calling. There was no doubt or hesitation. Something inside me knew I was being taken to a place that transcended anything I had ever known. I began to move towards the light, which became brighter, more intense and welcoming, like a silent invitation. The last thing I heard before I walked away completely was the soft voice of a doctor saying, "We're losing him again." But this time, the phrase seemed to be just a distant echo. I didn't care about the struggles of the medical team, nor the details of what was happening in the room. I was ready to move on, to cross this new barrier and discover what was on the other side. As I walked away, the light grew around me, and a sense of deep peace began to fill every part of my soul. I was on a journey that I could no longer stop, and I knew, deep down in my being, that what awaited me was a revelation that would change everything. As I stepped completely away from the hospital room and the medical fights for my life, I was enveloped in a comfortable darkness, a kind of welcoming emptiness that wasn't scary, but rather comforting. Suddenly, a light began to form in front of me, transforming the void into something alive and pulsing. I was being guided towards a tunnel. It was as if a gentle but unrelenting force was pulling me forward, and I knew my journey had truly begun. The walls of the tunnel seemed to dance with vibrant, fluid colors, as if each tone had its own energy. Each step forward was like a walk through my own life, and, as I progressed, images began to project around me, as if someone was showing a movie of everything I had ever experienced. First, I saw my birth, my mother holding me tenderly in her arms. The image was vivid, filled with a deep nostalgia that made me feel loved like never before. With each step, new scenes of my life appeared. I saw my childhood, simple moments full of innocence, like when I learned to ride a bike or when I played with friends by the river. These memories brought pure happiness, without the complexities and worries that adult life adds. I felt like I was living each moment again, immersed in a joy so profound that I almost forgot the nature of my journey. Then I saw my wedding. There was my wife, with a smile that could light up any darkness. I felt the love that brought us together, the same love that helped me move forward after your early departure. I relived the moment I held my daughter Sarah for the first time, the weight of her littleness in my arms, and I realized that those happy moments were the true treasures of my life. With each image, I felt lighter, as if the joy I experienced was preparing me for something greater. As I progressed further into the tunnel, each scene became brighter, richer in detail and emotion. I felt tears running down my face as I relived everything I had forgotten or put aside. It was as if my life was being revealed in its pure essence, without the hurts, mistakes, and regrets that accompanied it in the material world. At the end of the tunnel, a brighter and more intense light awaited me, radiating a peace that knew no limits. She seemed to call to me with infinite tenderness, and I knew that upon reaching her, I would have a transformative encounter. The feeling was indescribable. Everything around me seemed to vibrate with a truth that transcends words. My spirit was ready to cross the last barrier, certain that what awaited me was the true answer to the meaning of life. When I finally reached the end of the tunnel, I was enveloped by a light so intense and welcoming that it seemed to touch every part of my soul. It wasn't just an ordinary light. It was a living presence, an energy that conveyed peace, love, and compassion in its purest form. I was before a serene and imposing figure, a presence that I immediately recognized as Jesus. His image radiated an aura of indescribable peace, and the moment our eyes met, I felt the entire weight of my existence lifted. He approached me with a look of infinite compassion, and the intensity of his presence was so strong that my spirit almost trembled. Every step he took emanated love and wisdom, a light that seemed to heal every wound in my soul. He stretched out his hands and, in one of them, held a simple, luminous chalice, which seemed to shine with an intensity of its own. "Drink from this cup, Solomon," he said in a soft, steady voice, a voice that sounded like the melody of 1,000 angelic choirs in perfect harmony. "This is the love of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Without hesitation, I took the cup in my hands. As I lifted it to my lips, I felt a comforting warmth spread throughout my being, a sensation that seemed to fill every void, every pain, and every regret I had accumulated throughout my life. With each sip, I felt my soul being renewed, as if a new breath of life was transforming me. The love that Jesus transmitted was so deep and intense that there were no words to describe it. It was a peace I had never known. As I drank, Jesus placed one of his hands on my shoulder, looking directly into my eyes. "You have always been loved, Solomon, and every act of love and kindness you performed in life was inspired by the love of God in you." His words resonated in my soul like absolute truth. Everything I thought was flawed, everything I thought I had been insufficient, now seemed to make sense in the light of your loving gaze. After a few moments of sacred silence, Jesus continued, "There are truths that many do not understand. I'm here to show you one of them." There was a solemnity in his voice, and I knew I was about to receive knowledge that would transform my view of the world and the very nature of good and evil. At that moment, I understood that I was facing a revelation that was not just for me, but for all humanity. He smiled, and I felt that in that moment, I had learned the true meaning of love, peace, and acceptance. I was ready to hear what he had to teach me, certain that the encounter that would change my life was just beginning. Jesus approached me with a serious expression, yet full of compassion. His eyes shone with indescribable wisdom, as if they were windows to a truth that transcends human understanding. I felt that something of great importance was about to be revealed, and every fiber of my being was attentive, absorbing every word he was about to speak. "Solomon," he began, "there is a hidden truth that many do not understand." He paused, as if giving me time to process the importance of what came next. "Lucifer," he continued, "is a force that feeds on hatred, fear, and suffering. He is not a powerful entity in himself, but he is strengthened through those who allow themselves to be consumed by these emotions." Jesus' words echoed in my mind, revealing a different understanding of the concept of evil than I had imagined. I had always thought of Lucifer as an overwhelming presence, an impenetrable and terrifying shadow. But now Jesus was showing me that his strength lay not in his essence, but rather in our own spiritual weakness. "Lucifer is an inferior entity, Solomon," he continued, "and has no power over those who stand firm in faith, love, and compassion. He feeds on souls who are spiritually sick, on people who cannot forgive, who carry hurts and grudges, and who are trapped in their own hatred. He is a spiritual parasite, unable to face the true power of love." I was absorbed by this revelation. It was as if Jesus was shining a light on a dark corner of my understanding, showing me that the battle between good and evil was not as literal as I had thought. Lucifer's power was not inevitable or invincible. He was a force that depended on humanity's spiritual weaknesses and infirmities. "Therefore, Solomon," Jesus continued, "true spiritual evolution occurs when you overcome hatred with love, and when you find strength in me. It is through forgiveness, kindness, and compassion that you free yourself from any inferior influence." He placed his hand on my chest, and an indescribable heat ran through my being, like a confirmation of his words. "Whoever lives in love is protected. Whoever gains strength in me is unapproachable by darkness." I felt a new understanding growing within me. Jesus was showing me that our battle is not against an external and invincible evil, but rather an internal journey of transformation, where love is our greatest defense. With this revelation, I realized that the mission he would entrust to me would have a profound purpose. to urge people to abandon hatred and embrace love, strengthening themselves spiritually so as not to fall prey to the shadows that Lucifer represented. You will see more, Solomon knowing Jesus concluded, and you will understand what needs to be done. After Jesus, words about the true power of love and the fragility of the forces that feed on hate, he led me further, toward a scene that seemed to transcend any earthly description. The light that surrounded us expanded, transforming into a breathtaking celestial landscape. All around me I saw hills covered in fields of flowers that glowed in indescribable colors, shades of blue, purple and gold that seemed to have a life of their own. The air was scented with a fragrance so pure and comforting that it filled my soul with peace. As we walked, a familiar figure began to stand out from the crowd ahead. Little by little, I realized that it wasn't just one person, but several, each one radiating an energy of love and joy that I had never experienced on earth. And in the midst of this crowd, I saw my mother's face. I was paralyzed with surprise and joy, my heart overflowing with an emotion that can only be described as a reunion of souls. She was there, young and full of life, with a smile that I remembered well from my childhood days. Beside him, I saw my father, who looked at me with pride and tenderness. It was a reunion that transcended all barriers of longing and time. I ran towards them, feeling tears streaming down my face, but this time they were tears of pure joy and accomplishment. When I hugged my mom and dad, I felt like every lost piece of my soul was being restored. All of life's hurts, losses, and regrets were dissolved in that moment of union. Soon, other beloved figures began to approach. I saw my niece, who had left very young, and also other relatives who had left this life before me. Each of them greeted me with hugs and smiles that radiated love, and it was as if the connection we had had never been broken. The pain of separation seemed like a foreign concept there. They looked at me with pure and sincere love, as if I had never stopped being by their side. Jesus, who was watching me in silence, smiled at me with an expression of compassion and understanding, as if he knew how much this reunion meant to me. "They have always been with you, Solomon," he said, his voice sounding like serene music. "True love transcends any separation, and they have been waiting for this moment, to let you know that you were never truly alone." The feeling of peace and completeness was overwhelming. At that moment I understood that love is the connection that unites us, even beyond death. There, surrounded by my loved ones, I felt a new strength emerging within me, as if that moment prepared me for the mission that Jesus was about to entrust to me. While I was still enveloped by the presence of my loved ones and the peace of that reunion, a distinct and powerful presence began to approach. At first it was just a sensation, a majestic weight in the air, as if the environment itself was reverberating with an energy that transcended understanding. I turned towards the direction of the presence, and then I saw him, a grandiose figure, emanating a pure and intense white light, which seemed to envelop everything around him. It was a towering angel, with wings that stretched out to heavenly magnitude, shining with a strength that I knew to be incorruptible and eternal. He wore shining armor, and in his right hand he wielded a magnificent sword, the blade of which radiated a light that seemed to pierce the soul. His presence was both inspiring and imposing, like a guardian representing divine protection. Jesus approached me and, with a serene smile, said to me, "This is Michael, the Archangel, protector of humanity and souls who seek love and truth." Archangel Michael looked at me with a firm but compassionate expression. His eyes were intense, as if they could see every detail of my existence and understand the battles I had faced in life. Standing beside Jesus, Michael radiated an unwavering strength and determination, as if his mission to protect the light in the world was his eternal purpose. Upon feeling his presence, I realized that the peace and security I experienced were reflections of his role as a defender of souls seeking the path of truth and love. Then, with a voice that sounded like thunder but also like a calm whisper, Miguel addressed me. "Solomon, you are being prepared for an important mission. It is not an easy task, but know that my brothers and I will be by your side, guiding and protecting you." His words were like a declaration of commitment, a promise of support and of fighting alongside me against the shadows that inhabit the world. He raised his sword and held it pointed toward the sky, and a glow radiated from the blade, illuminating everything around us. "Light is our weapon, and love is our shield," said Miguel, as he lowered his sword and looked at me with a seriousness that touched my soul deeply. Lucifer cannot harm those who are protected by love, and hatred cannot prevail where compassion reigns. Know that you have a strength within you, Solomon, and your mission on earth will be a beacon for those who seek redemption and truth. These words reverberated in my spirit. I felt a determination rising within me, as if the very essence of the archangel was being engraved into my being. Meeting Miguel gave me a new understanding of my own strength and showed me that the battle was not a simple physical fight, but a spiritual journey to spread light where there is darkness. I understood now that my purpose on earth was not just to survive, but to live in a way that inspired and helped those who also sought this truth. With a wave from Jesus and a last look from Miguel, the scenery began to disappear. They were preparing me to return to my body, to take with me the mission of spreading this truth to the world. I knew that upon awakening, life as I knew it would change forever. As the glow of heavenly light faded, I realized I was not alone yet. Beside me, two figures stood out, radiating an aura of peace and holiness that made me feel a deep reverence. One of the men wore a simple brown cloak. His face was serene and smiling, and I immediately recognized him as Saint Francis of Assisi. His expression was one of absolute humility, as if every movement was an extension of his devotion and love for all that is divine. The other figure was imposing. With a penetrating gaze and evident compassion, he carried in his hands the signs of the stigmata, and a sacred peace emanated from his presence. I learned that I was standing before Padre Pio, a saint known for his deep connection with God and the miracles attributed to his unshakable faith. Upon noticing my surprise, Saint Francis bowed in a slight wave, and Padre Pio smiled, extending his hand to me. When I squeezed it, I felt a warmth that warmed my soul, an energy that conveyed fraternity and peace. "Welcome, Solomon," said Padre Pio, with a welcoming smile. "The path you have taken so far has been long and full of challenges, but know that each experience has brought you closer to your true essence." His words were profound, and I felt an undeniable connection to him, as if I were standing next to a dear friend who understood me deeply. Saint Francis, who had remained silent, now spoke. "Simplicity and love for creation are keys to understanding God's will," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Remember, Solomon, love for others is the most direct path to the Father's heart." He spoke with pure conviction, and his eyes sparkled with a joy and peace that was almost palpable. As I listened, I felt an even more intense presence beside me. Jesus approached us, watching with tenderness and compassion. He placed a hand on my shoulder and looked at me with a gaze that seemed to read every secret of my soul. "Solomon Rise," he said, "the world needs a message of love, and I am entrusting you with this mission. There is darkness on earth, a darkness that feeds on hatred and division, and as long as this hatred persists, there will be souls who wander in the shadows." Jesus paused, and I felt the weight of the responsibility he was bestowing on me. "I want you to take a message to the world. Love and unity are the true weapons against evil. The power of love transcends any influence of Lucifer, and when hate is overcome by forgiveness and compassion, the world will be ready for my return." Jesus' words echoed in my soul, and I felt a renewal of purpose like never before. "Prepare their hearts so that they can receive me," he said, "by teaching them to love like children, with purity and truth, and to care for one another, as I care for you." At that moment, I realized the enormity of what he was asking of me. It wouldn't be an easy task, but I knew that with the strength of Jesus, Archangel Michael, and the inspiration of the saints by my side, I would have everything I needed to accomplish this mission. I felt that the very essence of love and faith had been planted in my being, and that, from that moment on, my life would be dedicated to spreading this message of unity, hope, and redemption. With one last exchange of glances between us, Jesus and the saints walked away, leaving me enveloped in a deep peace. But with the clear understanding that my task on earth had just begun, the light began to fade, and slowly, I felt like I was being pulled back into a heavier world, a world where the body and physical pain were becoming part of me again. It was a smooth transition, but I felt the resistance of my spirit as I realized I was returning to my body. The warmth and lightness that had filled my soul in that heavenly realm now gave way to a familiar heaviness. One last image of Jesus and the Archangel Michael was engraved in my mind, as a reminder of the mission I was to fulfill. I woke up slowly, as if emerging from the depths of a calm ocean onto the choppy surface of reality. The sound of the heart monitors and the low hum of medical equipment around me brought me back to full consciousness. My vision was still blurry, but I could see the faces of my children, Sarah and Jacob, through the living room glass. They watched me with teary eyes and expressions of relief and astonishment. Amidst that feeling of heaviness and weakness, I made an effort and slightly raised my hand, waving at them, as if saying, "I'm here, I'm fine." Sarah entered the room soon after, with her eyes full of tears and an expression of disbelief. She approached the bed and held my hand tightly. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "we thought that you wouldn't come back. They said there was no more hope." Jacob, my oldest son, stood a little further away, but I could see the emotion on his face, the relief mixed with shock. I knew there weren't enough words to explain what had happened, but a simple smile seemed to comfort them. I spent days in the ICU, slowly recovering. My body still bore the scars of the infection that almost took me, but my mind was flooded with the visions and revelations of the experience. Every detail of that journey was engraved in my soul, as if I had been sealed by a promise. I knew my life now had a clear purpose, something I had never felt so intensely before. As my health improved, I began sharing my experience with Sarah and Jacob. They listened in silence, each reacting in their own way. Sarah, a skeptic at heart, had difficulty accepting everything immediately. She shook her head and looked at me with a mix of concern and curiosity, trying to understand what that meant. Jacob, on the other hand, seemed more receptive, as if he somehow already intuited the depth of what I was sharing. With each passing day, I felt a greater commitment to the mission that Jesus had entrusted to me. My return to life was no accident. I had been brought back to share a message of love, compassion, and unity. I realized that despite all the challenges I would face, I was ready to accomplish this task. With each person I met, with each opportunity I had, I would share what I had learned in that dimension where love was everything and where true power was in the union of hearts. Now, every day I live is a chance to accomplish this mission. I know the world still needs a lot of healing and a constant reminder that love is the answer to all the divisions and darkness. And as long as I have the strength, I will dedicate my life to being a bearer of that light, preparing the way for the return of Christ, who one day, I know, will come to reunite us in peace and harmony. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.